Hello, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us on this latest episode of Mario Nawfal's live stream. This episode is going to be a continuation of a breaking news space we had yesterday on X. That was co-hosted by Sarah and Justin, good friends of ours, that kind of discussed about the Epstein file, and also a continuation of yesterday's live stream where we even talked about Elon's political party. And so for this live stream, we want to touch upon both major news, major developments. We have a full panel. I'm also joined by David, who will also be helping me co-host for this episode. David, what's your thoughts?
Look, as of last night, I wasn't even sure that memo was real. I'm still not sure the memo is real. The story we know is real. The memo that disappeared off the Axios site, that I still have questions on. But yeah, Caroline Levitt confirmed a little while ago that no, there is in fact no quote unquote client files. I know a lot of people are absorbing this. There's been a lot of news today about some people disappointed, not understanding how there can be all this evidence, especially if you read the memo yesterday, whether it was real or not. There was that gigabytes and gigabytes of evidence that supposedly didn't implicate anybody else, and this was sort of the case closed, plus the fact, and this is kind of old news, that Epstein supposedly killed himself, and that was confirmed by the lack of evidence to suggest otherwise. And there was links in that memo, again, not sure if it's real or not, the links from the memo last night with 11 hours of video purporting to show the cell, and nothing happened. I have a feeling that there's going to be a scope of opinion from it is what it is. I mean, at least that's my opinion, to people who say this is a massive cover-up. So I'm excited to hear what the panel has to say about what they think, and we'll let the conspiracy theories go.
If I could just jump in.
Go ahead, JJ.
Because
I knew you were going to go first, by the way.
So I'm Jason Burmis. I've been studying this literally since it happened in 2007-8 when we first got that Palm Springs case. I need to make it clear to everybody. There is no client list, and there never has been, because Jeffrey Epstein was not selling young girls. Instead, Jeffrey Epstein was a serial pedophile that would then use these girls to not only recruit other girls within the network, but then curry favor and cut deals, as well as blackmail others who went there. So in other words, they never came to Jeffrey Epstein and said, I'm going to pay you this for that. They would come there. There would be business deals, mostly arms deals, because Jeffrey Epstein was an arms dealer. Okay, Prince Andrew was an arms dealer. You can look it up. It's fact. And he would say, hey, which ones do you like? And then those would be the girls that would go with those people. Now, if he felt like he needed to tape them and blackmail them, that would be another aspect of this. So what's really wrong is the way this whole thing has been framed, that people were going there to buy young girls. That is not how it worked. There wasn't just one island, by the way. There were two. And Steve Bannon, he did, I think, 8 hours of interviews with Epstein before he was arrested by the Southern District of New York. And in that interview, he actually states that he had two islands. And Bannon goes, islands of Dr. Moreau? He goes, that is correct. And that is a reference to the fact that he was into transhumanism as well. So I am going to allow somebody else to speak, but I just wanted to lay that groundwork.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I know you and I actually talked about this. I don't remember what we were talking about on the last show at this point anymore, but somehow it led to this conversation. And it's funny that this broke now. Look, I want to go around to the rest of the panel. We'll go one by one. I mean, do you think... I want to know, I have two questions. One, if the timing of the release is interesting to anybody, because look, Bibi Netanyahu and Trump are meeting today very soon, and their potential for a ceasefire deal to be announced is high. You saw the Bolsonaro stuff today, maybe on X, and that was interesting. And then on top of all that, we have this leak last night on Sunday night. Caroline Levitt addresses it today. Timing-wise is very interesting, especially considering this whole America Party thing that's going on, and we're just on the heels of the big, beautiful bill passing. I mean, literally, there couldn't be a more crowded news period. So is it intentional? But then again, is there any there? And so I'm going to go speaker by speaker, and you all let me know what you think. I mean, is this real? I can't see everybody's names because they're tiny, but I'm going to go to you, Mike, because I can see yours first.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on, David. And I felt for you. Early this morning, I saw when you were talking about the Epstein files, and you were talking about it was just on Axios and don't believe it yet, and I was feeling for you because from my side of the aisle, I'm a Democratic centrist. We've had an opinion on this for a very long time. David Epstein was an absolutely despicable human being, absolutely horrible person, and the events fell out as they may. But as far as there being a client list, if you've made that much money in your life and you've accomplished the things that he was able to accomplish, I don't think you're going to have things like a client list laying around. I'm a pilot. I've flown people all over the world, and it's a small aircraft. It's a small, privately owned aircraft. We're not always. It's not always a regulation to have a manifest of who's on the aircraft. So I can see a lot of different reasons why there's just not a big master list of all things Epstein. Sometimes a case is what it is a case. You follow the evidence, it leads you to a certain path, and this path ended up with him taking his own life in a jail cell in Southern District of New York.
So you believe he did kill himself?
I do believe he killed himself.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, look, I still don't know if the memo is real. I'm still sticking with the memo either wasn't ready to be released or something, because the memo still doesn't fit right with me. But the story in there is real. And look, let's talk about it for a second, right? So, and I agree that there's not going to be a client list. This whole idea that these Epstein files, and I said this last night, there's the whole idea that the Epstein files are sitting in a file cabinet somewhere labeled Epstein files, and they're labeled 1 release, 2 release, 3 release, and it has all this information in it that's going to hold all these people responsible in all these high positions. It's the same thing like, Stefan and I were talking about when the JFK files and the RFK files, like everyone's like, oh, we're finally going to have our smoking gun. Yeah, after 50 years, they just kept that perfect little file implicating everybody, dusted off in case anybody ever wanted to release it unredacted. So I never thought the Epstein files were a real thing with respect to having evidence that's going to actually be actionable, because why would anybody keep those records? And
I felt so bad because I felt as though it was, needlessly dividing the Republican Party. It was one of those things, or kind of an unforced error. There was a lot of unity. There was a lot of, when you guys won the election, you guys had, a tailwind, and some people started drinking from the fire hose, and we're going to get this and we're going to get that. I don't think all of that was necessary. And I think it was just an unforced error and made more division. And what you guys made was a pretty darn cohesive, very, very varied coalition. And there was no need to just even kind of have that Epstein list as part of that. So,
David, but can I just and let me, I guess, because we do want other speakers, but just to kind of maybe flip it on the other side based on your comment, and let me go to Johnny for this, because again, we're going down and we want all the first. Like, I'm hearing this because David, I think that, let's remember, Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, right? During the first Trump administration. We saw nothing during the Biden administration because, and people, kind of ran wild with the conspiracy theories, but it looks like, that was the case. There was no file, there was no client list, there was no this grand conspiracy. But then, Johnny, my question to you is, then why did the Trump administration in the second term feed into this idea that there was a conspiracy? There was a list. We all remember the binders that they handed out to certain influencers, right? Like, I understand, David, your point, but Johnny, the Trump administration has only themselves to blame for feeding into this, and Pam Bondi specifically as well. So either they're lying, and as Elon said, Trump was on the list before he deleted that, or there was nothing never there, but the Trump administration just gained the people to kind of get support, and there was nothing there. What do you think, Johnny?
Okay, well, I got to say, what Jason was saying was quite true. 99.9% of the girls who were being brought into Epstein's compounds were being abused by Jeffrey Epstein, the preferential pedophile himself. And the rest was, if you want to indulge, you get yourself further in with the cabal, and the cabal gets protection. But when it comes down to the Epstein client list, I can tell you could go to Newspace now, and you can find all of the names you're going to find. You can find the unredacted client lists, and you can find the unredacted, flight logs, and you can find the unredacted address books. And those are about as much information as we are going to get. The rest has to be investigated. I've been doing this for a long time. And this Trump backwards and forwards with Musk and the Epstein file stuff, this is an illusion, guys. I reported just 4 days before the election, Jeffrey Epstein was running Edge, 100% funded by Epstein, while Musk was doing courses at Edge on how to manipulate people by using social media. If the base level of this conversation has to start with Elon Musk was complicit with Epstein at one point, and so was Donald Trump at one point. And this is a dirty pool of dirty people who have had a load of time in the sunshine and tried to get away from this as much as possible. They've moved parties. I mean, Elon Musk used to be a Democrat. Trump used to be a Democrat. They've run away from it over and over again. And now we're entering into a new era, an era of fifth generation warfare, where all of this collateral, when we saw the first release of the Epstein files, we knew it was going to be a joke. People like me who've been researching it, who helped research for One Nation Under Blackmail, who've been writing about this for 6-7 years, and we all knew that it was going to be a joke. And what they released was the unredacted, the redacted versions of what's already out there. So what it is a slow release of nothing, and keep everybody excited all the time, keep everybody talking about drama and conspiracy. But we've got to start at a new level. We got to start at a level where we understand that there's a load of information out there that people are choosing. The majority of the media are choosing not to look at, both mainstream and independent, because it's uncomfortable and it shows that all people colluded.
You know, last show, now I remember we were talking about the Diddy trial with Jason. One of the concepts that we were discussing in it was the fact that, you know, it seems that we knew the Diddy parties were happening. We knew the kind of people that were there. And now Diddy goes to this trial and he's only convicted of like the least possible offense. And we had this whole conversation of, you know, can people be held accountable at the highest levels, right? And then you look at this particular instance, and to just what you were saying, Johnny, it was anything there, and then maybe they made a lot of something about nothing because there was promises made that these things would be released, but they didn't actually exist to release, and maybe the whole time and nothing ever existed? Or do you think it was just so sufficiently destroyed and buried that there was never going to be anything to release, and it was really just playing into the distrust of government, and maybe this was one of the promises that could never possibly have been kept? Do you think it's a cover-up, or do you think there really wasn't anything there? And then I'll throw it back to you, Johnny, and then I'll get Grant's take on it.
There is masses if they wanted to prosecute, but they can't prosecute because it's sticky, icky everywhere. You know, you go into detail about who's actually managing this case. On the Epstein victims lawyer, one of the main lawyers was Stanley Pottinger, who was working for the CIA, who lived 500 meters away from Jeffrey Epstein, who shared an office when running guns in Iran-Contra with Jeffrey Epstein. It's mucky everywhere. Giuliani was the one who didn't prosecute him in that. You know, everybody's got their part of this affair. And honestly, if they wanted to prosecute, they could. If they wanted to find evidence, they could. But they don't. They wanted to die. And one reason, because it's easier to just paint Jeffrey Epstein as a Mossad rather than accept he was recruited and put through CIA training and worked on for multiple intelligence agencies, because that would mean Senate, congressional testimony and hearing would have to take place, and it would be the CIA working on American soil. That's what they're trying to hide.
Jason's up there. I think he's as of right now, he's putting a poster of you on his wall. He is so excited up there in his tiny screen about what you just said. Grant, let me ask you your take on it. That is a possibility, and that's a theory that I've heard, and obviously some people agree with that theory. You know, what if it's not so much that everybody it's not like an intelligence operation. It's not so much that everybody who went to the island was engaged in the activities that occurred there. Just as if everybody went to the Diddy party, didn't necessarily go downstairs into the freak off. So how much of this is people going, oh man, this could get me in trouble, let's cover this up, even though I didn't do anything wrong, versus how many people did wrong? I mean, what do you think?
I mean, nobody knows everybody that did wrong, right? But we know that Donald Trump and Jeffrey Epstein have an incredibly long history going back at least about 25 years, right? One of the whistleblowers who really led to Jeffrey Epstein being outed in public had started, had met him as a Trump Mar-a-Lago employee, right? And then met Jeffrey Epstein and, left the club. So these people were neighbors, right? We've seen the images of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump together partying. We've heard Jeffrey Epstein saying that they were best friends, like being, in recordings before he died. So, I mean, we know that there's this relationship. And we also know that the Trump administration sometimes plays extremely fast and loose with the truth. And so nobody really knows if there's an actual client list sitting on anybody's desk. But we do know that there was a phone list. And that's why people suspect there's a client list. The phone list was published back in 2014, and it included Democrats and Republicans, a lot of wealthy people. But again, I agree with Johnny in the sense that you can't say that every single person that flew to this island was there for nefarious purposes. And I've done these kind of broad-ranging investigations that go up into the high levels of something. And, for every 10 people that are involved, maybe only one is actually involved. The other 9 are, just at the party for some reason. Just giving an example and not going too deep, there's this Russian-American professor who wrote a book on Russian ethnic lobbying in the United States with a foreword by a former Republican congressman named Kurt Weldon, right? And it was like, this guy was inviting everybody to his, Washington shindigs. They were being held in the Senate Hart Office building. And you saw people like Dennis Hastert and Jeff Sessions and, a lot of very prominent Republicans who were invited. They were there. They were associated with this guy, this Russian spy, but they weren't like in on the thing. Now, the guy who co-wrote the book and, he was a little bit deeper, so to speak. And you see, that's the thing, like nobody really knows. And so all of this withholding of information after promising transparency and then the fake releases, it's just building up the expectation that there really is some sort of Donald Trump cover up going on. Because let's face it, why would you not release these things if they were real and you're not involved? And why would you say they exist when they don't? It just doesn't all add up. And the only logical thing is some sort of cover up of something when you look at all the, pieces and put them together. So, I mean, it's their own behavior that's bringing the suspicion at this point. It's not like people are suspicious for no reason. I mean, you've got this pattern of lying, obfuscating, falsely releasing things, saying things exist and saying they don't exist. I mean, 3 is more than a coincidence, and there's 4. This
so
is
one of those
instances.
So do you think it's possibly one of those instances of the cover up is bigger than the crime, or is it the crime that's bigger?
Well, that's the thing. Nobody knows if there's a bigger crime. I mean, we know that there was illegal sex trafficking and prostitution going on, similar to what happened with Diddy. But, they never got a conviction that was going to put Jeffrey Epstein away for multiple years, right? This Diddy conviction looks like he's going to be behind bars for quite a few years. There's going to be some real accountability. With Jeffrey Epstein, again, another one of the unusual things about it is he gets into prison, commits suicide apparently very quickly. And the same day, the Attorney General, Bill Barr, at the time, a man whose nickname since the 1990s was the cover-up general, I should add, he visited Manhattan the same day to go meet with Rupert Murdoch, and then Epstein disappears, and people are like, well, there's certainly a correlation, but we don't know about any causations. And that's the problem. There's so many correlations. There's nothing that says anything about causation. Although, most people, and I couldn't dispute it. I couldn't disprove that Jeffrey Epstein didn't, kill himself. But I mean, even I've reported on enough subjects to have reported on a situation where a very credible coroner told me a story about how someone's murder was made to look like a suicide in a case that he was, medical examining. So this is the problem. They've opened up this can of worms, and how do you put them back in? I mean, they did not have to open up this can of worms. And that's my big point.
Well, and you saw he beat himself up too before he ended up killing himself. So he was a danger to himself.
I didn't see it. And if I did, I would tell you definitively what happened. I promise.
we saw when the JFK files were released, and then the RFK files were released, all the FK files.
Well, they released some more JFK files this week, and it was pretty consequential, actually.
Oh, well.
There was a consequential event. You want me to...
Not yet, but looks like SitRep, we're gonna have to do another video space on it. But when those files were initially released, it did show very interesting things about the length that our intelligence communities went to sort of to cover up a fumbled investigation, essentially. I mean, they went all over the world. They knew about this guy. He kind of slipped through the cracks, whether it's intentionally or negligently, and then they kind of bent over backwards to hide the fact that they were incompetent, leading to a multi-decade long conspiracy that it was all planned and coordinated. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't. What I'm just saying was the conspiracy became bigger than the story, and the story was intelligence and competence, that the cover-up of which made it even worse than what it always was. At least that's what the records show. If you believe them or not, that's what the records show. Now, I don't know if this is what's going to happen with Epstein. Now, Clint, I want to send it over to you. I mean, what do you think? I mean, what's your take on all of this?
Well, I think it was an intelligence operation. I don't think that they did this to themselves, or they let the cat out of the bag, or they brought this upon themselves. I think that there was massive demand from the voters for justice on this issue, and they campaigned on it because they knew that that would be appealing. And as far as unforced errors go, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, came out and said thousands of hours of video of him with underage minors, and that's why it's taking so long. She also said she was reviewing the list. I mean, there's just so much smoke to this fire that to ignore the fire is insane to me. And then also to ignore the connections to Israeli intelligence. I agree that it's a multi-intelligence operation. He's probably a triple agent. I think he's probably MI6, CIA, and Mossad, maybe even French intelligence. I'm not sure. But regardless, this is a huge, huge story. It has all of the momentum that was going into Trump's second term is now, as far as I can tell, at least from the base, is largely turning against him, and rightfully so. If it started with no new wars and he's bombing Iran, then he gets the big beautiful bill passed and he talks about mass amnesty, and now they promise the goods when it comes to Epstein justice, and now case closed. There's nothing to see here. I just think at some point you're gonna reach a tipping point where even the most diehard Trump supporters ultimately realize that they've been duped. Now, I was not a diehard Trump supporter, but I did expect him to deliver on some of these things, and it seems quite evident that he doesn't intend to, and that everybody that's around him, some of which I know, some of which I've shared the stage with, like Kash Patel, I am shocked. Honestly, I am shocked by the depravity, by the deception, by the duplicity. It's disgusting, and I think that everybody involved ought to resign, if not be prosecuted themselves. It is gross, to put it mildly.
When you say everybody involved should be resigned or prosecuted, who are you referring to? You talking about DOJ, FBI, Van Bondi, Kash Patel, all of them should resign.
If this is the cover-up that it looks to be, yes, they are covering up for they're basically contributing to the cover-up of the solicitation and trafficking of minors to the rich and powerful for blackmail purposes. At some point, someone has to pay a price.
Sure. Let me just a quick follow-on question. So, I mean, Elon Musk tweeted this, where he kind of mentioned the idea that Trump was on the list, and that's why the delay and blah, 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 when the first breakup happened a month ago. Do you think that was Elon blowing smoke and kind of being exaggerated to hurt Donald Trump? Or now that what we saw, there is no, quote, no client list, do you think that's going to fuel the fire of this belief that maybe Trump is on it, and that's why they're not releasing it?
I don't know, but I want to encourage people to look past Trump on this. When you're talking about a trafficking operation with hundreds, probably thousands of victims, to the richest and most powerful people all over the world, not just American politicians, but all over the world, this is much bigger than Donald Trump. This is much bigger than the presidency. This is probably the biggest scandal in my lifetime, right up there with forcing toxic vaccines into billions of people all over the world that killed countless. So whether or not Elon was telling the truth, whether or not he had evidence to say that, whether or not that was just dirty pool because he was pissed because Trump was challenging his motivations when it came to rejecting the big beautiful bill or whatever else, I don't know. I don't know, and I don't care. I doubt Elon has actually read in on that level. But as Jason and so many others on this panel have done the deep dives, we've done the research to know that there is fire to this smoke. So unless there's justice to be brought, I want everybody behind bars. That's my starting point, and then I work backwards from there.
Let me throw it over to you, Liz. I mean, and I understand Clint's point. He's mad. He wants accountability. What if the whatever cover up ensued before President Trump took office, and he sends the FBI, he sends the DOJ in, and they think there's going to be something there, and they're like, I don't know what to tell you. There's nothing here. How far back do you go to try to hold people accountable, and how much is the American public willing to accept on that?
Well, we know that there's been a cover up going on regarding Jeffrey Epstein for decades now. It's just like nothing new. I guess the question is President Trump's DOJ and or FBI currently involved in a cover up? And I don't believe that's true. What we do know, though, is that after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested the first time and after several of his homes were raided, both times, by the way, we know that the evidence was tampered with and or destroyed and or not handed over immediately, aka meaning that they could hide evidence. That happened after they raided his Palm Beach home during his first arrest back in like 2008 or 2009. And then when he was arrested again in 2019, that happened after the raid in his New York home. They didn't give over all the evidence right away. Like his lawyers had access to that evidence after the raid. So that doesn't make any sense. So how much evidence has gone missing? We know that there was a deputy sheriff here in Palm Beach that actually took a lot of the evidence and copied it, including the blackmail tapes, and gave it to a man that lived here in Palm Beach, reportedly, and he ended up fleeing to Russia. And so he allegedly has a lot of the evidence. So there has been cover-ups for years. I mean, the fact that the first time he got arrested, he got this sweetheart deal and really didn't get any like severe punishment for what happened to him, and a lot of it was covered up. And by the way, the first time he was serving his jail time, prison sentence, whatever, his bodyguard actually went to CIA headquarters to do a training session with the CIA and to get a message for Jeffrey Epstein from the CIA to deliver to Jeffrey Epstein when he was in prison the first time. So there's your CIA link that some of you guys were talking about beforehand, and like more confirmation that Jeffrey Epstein was definitely tied to not just Mossad, to the CIA as well. In terms of President Trump and his administration, I don't believe that they are covering this up. President Trump, there was a reference to him being friendly with Jeffrey Epstein years ago. And that is true. He was friendly with Jeffrey Epstein. That friendship started before Jeffrey Epstein's operation started. Jeffrey Epstein's operation did not start until Ghislaine Maxwell became his girlfriend or handler and came in the picture. And when she came in the picture, all of a sudden, that's when the massages started. That's when the girls were brought to the home. Who was procuring those girls? It was Ghislaine Maxwell. That's when President Trump's relationship with Jeffrey Epstein started to crumble. They had a fallout. And after he found out what he was doing, he not only banned him from Mar-a-Lago, he later was the only person from the Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book that worked with the victims' lawyers to help him and them with their cases against Jeffrey Epstein. That lawyer's name is Bradley Edwards. He said it in his book, and he has said this in interviews as well, that out of every single person that he called in Jeffrey Epstein's Black Book, and he called every single contact, the only person that helped him take down Jeffrey Epstein and help the victims was President Trump many years ago. This was before he became president. So I don't believe President Trump is part of this cover up. Once he found out what Jeffrey Epstein was really about, he not only, kicked him to the curb, he helped the lawyers and the victims. In terms of
Liz, can I ask you a question real quick? Why would Trump not fire Bondi then? I mean, why she's coming out saying, "I've got the list, I've got the goods, we're reviewing it, we got thousands of hours of video," and then there's nothing. Why if Trump's not involved with the cover up, why is he not firing her today?
Okay, so my answer to that is, I think that looking at the situation and assuming that there was a cover up is, you're looking at it from like a 10,000 foot view. I'd like to go up higher and look at it from like a 30,000 foot view. And what I see happening is, first of all, if they are going to prosecute call them the clients, call them, the co-conspirators, call them Jeffrey Epstein's ring of pedophiles. What we know is that there were people that went to the island, went to his homes, that were good friends of Jeffrey Epstein, that he invited, that raped women and children. Okay. We know that for a fact. If President Trump's DOJ is going to prosecute those people based off of the current FBI's investigation, they are not going to release evidence that's going to hurt those cases right now. So what I think is happening right now is I think that what we're seeing is a lot of Kabuki theater that is very strategic to keep the people that were involved in this ring guessing and on the run. That's what I think is really going on. I think that there's a lot of psychological warfare happening. And I think
we've been at this for 6 years plus. I mean, at some point, hold on. Sorry. I had to like 6. Okay. Like this
20
is a
years.
law enforcement investigation, right? This isn't a CIA plant going in deep undercover to try to get in the desk of Vladimir Putin where he can get his personal notes and send it over to the CIA, or an attempt by the NSA to crack some sort of super encryption. That's not what this is. This is a law enforcement that, I granted, takes a long time. The problem with your theory list is Jeffrey Epstein was indicted. He was already indicted. Mm-hmm. This is 6 years. Like so there's either 2 explanations to this.
Right. But when you say 6 years, like 4 of those years, President Trump was not in office. Joe Biden was.
Right. But the FBI is going to okay, I got it. But this is when people can first of all, correct me if I'm wrong. I know Clinton was on the list, apparently Trump, but Biden was like just Biden. Right. So there's FBI, the DOJ and Merrick Garland, they can do their investigations. So there's 2 things. Either, and this is where I was saying it earlier, either there is a conspiracy and there's a reason why Trump is not releasing this and Pam Bondi, or 2, what I personally believe is that everybody who fell within the Epstein client list played everybody as a fool. They just played it. They wanted to tap into the conspiracy theory portion of America. They wanted to tap into that for electoral reasonings. Now that they're in power and now they don't have to run into re-election, they can say, sorry, guys, there was nothing. And we saw this because they all went to the White House and handed them binders. And the people were there. All the conservative influencers had the binders and show it. And then they opened. They're like, what the hell is this? There's no, at some point, like this 4D, 5D, 6D chess, 6 years plus, like it's done. There's nothing else. This is the last thing. I don't know.
It hasn't even been 6 months since President Trump got into office, and Cash and Bongino have been there for less time. Yes, the Bindergate thing was absolutely ridiculous, and I think that it exposed a lot. But at the end of the day, if they are going to take down this ring, and the FBI from President Trump's first term and Biden's administration, if they are corrupt, then they're gonna need to clean house first. Number 1. Number 2, they're gonna have to go through all the.
This makes no sense, Liz. I'm sorry, because
makes no sense?
Because Jeffrey Epstein was indicted and hung himself when Donald Trump was the president. Why would Joe Biden then come in and investigate that 2 years, 3 years after the fact? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. This is not something that Joe Biden did, right? I mean, this is all something that Donald Trump did. And by the way, I looked it up, and yes, Bradley Edwards.
That Donald Trump did. What do you like? I don't
like there was nothing. Donald Trump is the one whose administration handed out the binders, right?
Right.
Like this year. And let me say this. I mean, I looked it up, and you're right about Bradley Edwards, the lawyer who represented the victims, has said multiple times that Donald Trump cooperated with him. And I think that does say something, but it doesn't say what it doesn't say either. Does that make sense? It doesn't rule out things either.
In terms of what?
Unfortunately, it just doesn't rule anything.
Let's let Stephen in, because wait, who is that? Stephen saying that?
It's Johnny.
Oh, Johnny. Real quick, let me get Stephen in the conversation, because he sat there, at least on my screen, patiently in the corner, and I want to get his take, and then we can go around.
Thanks, David. Well, first off, trust in government's at an all-time low. The government lied about the Gulf of Tonkin incident to get us into war in Vietnam. They lied about the Lusitania. They lied about 9/11.
That's probably why, right?
That the air is safe to breathe. We didn't find out until decades later the Saudis were complicit. There's probably more we don't know. They lied about COVID and vaccines, efficacy, as well as the where
no
the
lies in
COVID
the
came
middle.
from.
No lies
What's
in the
that?
middle, like the Gulf War, for example.
Sure. No, I mean, I could run through JFK files. Was Lee Harvey Oswald a patsy? I mean, there's all these things we don't know.
JFK, RFK, MLK.
Yeah, all of them. There's all these lies, and on top of that, you have Bohemian Grove that was exposed. All of our elected officials out in the redwoods of California, sacrificing an effigy to Moloch allegedly. So, what else don't we know? What else are they hiding from us? And I was texting my social media guy today. I said, put out a real banger on this whole Epstein thing, because so many people were looking forward to, Trump quoted a large part of the MAGA vote on the fact that we're going to find out who's on the Epstein list. Pam Bundy said, there's this whole stack of paperwork on my desk. I'm going to release it. You got Kash Patel on Fox News. It looks like he's got a gun to his back. What does he know? What is he not willing to say? Oh, well, there's people that, we can only go after him for so long, this and that. It seems to me like this is a big cover up. It could be a big PSYOP marketing operation to get the heat off the Trump administration. Maybe some of his pals are complicit, perhaps himself. It's highly conceivable. Was Jeffrey Epstein an asset of Mossad? Ghislaine Maxwell certainly had her IDF connections. So what was happening there? It's the same playbook we see with Diddy. And of course, Diddy's getting off soft on trial after all the big hype around him. So, it's conceivable to imagine that our politicians and elected officials around the world, or even unelected ones, were caught up in this blackmail network in order to concede concessions or concede control. But by whom and for what purpose? Perhaps we'll never know. But I think, we can safely say maybe in 100 years, we'll finally find out what happened on 9/11 or what happened during COVID. But the American people don't trust the government to tell the truth. And I don't think we're ever going to expect Donald Trump to out his buddies, or, if he was involved or whatever else. We're just not going to know. And for them to flip flop around this issue and then finally say, well, Epstein didn't kill himself. I mean, has anybody seen his cellmate? It was a New York corrupt cop. He looked like a jacked gorilla. He's like 6'5". That was his cellmate. Why would they pair this guy with somebody like that? I mean, everything just doesn't make sense. At first, there was no footage, and then we had the footage, and then the footage is missing a minute or two. So the story keeps changing. It seems obvious to anybody who's able to think that, it just doesn't make any sense. And I think he's going to lose a lot of support over this.
So hearing after everybody's had a chance to speak at this point, and hearing everybody, it seems like a consensus on the panel is that this was a cover-up. Whether it's a cover-up of one administration or another administration, it's part of something giant, something bigger. Nobody's going to be held accountable. So my question is, and then we'll just go around, whoever wants to jump in on it, because I know everybody has something to say, and I know Jason over there is probably dying, like literally. You could to jump in, but here's the thing. What if, and it's just hypothetically, what if it's not some giant conspiracy? What if there was a lot of rich and powerful people that were there? Maybe some rich and powerful people did some bad things. Epstein took the fall. Nobody else is going to be implicated because he was the fall guy. And the rest of this was just a bunch of speculation that turned into being nothing. And then Trump came in, and I agree the Pam Bondi binder incident was a little bit of a fumble, but after that, they're like, guys, there's nothing else here. We're just going to tell you there's nothing else here. Let's move on with our lives. So everybody thinks that that's the impossible reality. I'm not saying I believe any of these things. I'm just saying, is it impossible that there's really just nothing else there and we can just move on with our lives, and all this other stuff is just because we want to give life to something and hoping it's true? Just like the JFK files. Jason, go ahead, because I know you're dying. And then whoever's quickest to the draw gets the next comment. Go ahead.
All right,
You're muted.
No,
You're muted.
no,
Oh,
folks,
there you go.
let me just say this. I'm going to show you my work right now. First of all, the idea that there is not literally thousands of documents you can access right now at Court Listener of tens of thousands of pages, I know because I have them. So you can have those off the bat. Okay, so now we have that documentation. We have other co-conspirators' names. They've been sued. Leslie Groff, Nadia Marcinkova, Sarah Kalin, these were all in the network. Okay. Now I'm going to show everybody here. I know I'm a little thing, but it should come up in the middle. This video right here, this would go to the point where not everybody's involved. Here, Lewis Black tells about his one experience. By the way, it's at the top of my X at Jason Burmis, if you want to go watch it, where he went to Jeffrey Epstein's house. Jeffrey Epstein pulls him to the side and he shows him a whiteboard. He says, "What do you know what this is?" He goes, "No." He goes, "I was discussing weapons systems with the Israeli defense minister last night." You know, David, you mentioned the political sphere right now in that meeting with Netanyahu. Ehud Barak is named hundreds of times in the documents that we have. Okay, now I'm going to show you more documents because, again, we show our work here. They showed you one binder that they handed everybody. Okay, now just right here, what you're looking at are over a dozen binders that they don't even want you to know what it says on the sides of them. Now, as reported in the evidence, because these were taken out of the New York home, you had pictures and burned videos on DVDs. And look, here are the DVDs they took. Also in the evidence. So all that would be documentation that we do not have. And then those are the hard drives. And if you'll notice on those hard drives, they took them a second time. Those are 80 gig Maxter hard drives. I'm a dork. I know the era. And they already have police evidence tape on them. We mentioned Bradley Edwards here. Let's show our work. Bradley Edwards won in court. Jeffrey Epstein paid him a bunch of money for defamation. Now, you can't see the whole picture, but you'll see a box behind the women that he represented. That is stocked 4 high and over 20 lengths long with what? Documentation on the Jeffrey Epstein case. So right there, those are documents that are already out there. You know, I hate to keep repeating myself, but this is a multi-administration thing. And I want to dismiss some misnomers here. For instance, the host said that this has been going on 6 years. No, it's been going on since 2016 when Trump mentioned it with Hannity. Okay, so let's make that extremely clear. Now, go back to when he was asked just before the election on the JFK, RFK, MLK files, 9/11, and then Epstein. He was really hesitant on the Epstein ones. Go listen to what he says. He goes, the other ones more than the Epstein. But the Epstein thing has taken on a life of its own, and his base wants the answers. And that's why they've given you this dog and pony show. Okay, and just so people understand that, again, I'm not making it up. You could just go look up just this headline. New lawsuit against Jeffrey Epstein estate details sexual abuse and names alleged co-conspirators. Now, another thing that we should realize with that Trump connection is that his lawyer for at least one of the impeachments was Alan Dershowitz. Dershowitz cut the deal in Palm Springs. Dershowitz has gone on the record and says he knows who is on those videos that they haven't showed you because he's seen them. Another little interesting tidbit on that whole thing, okay, with Dershowitz is the fact that you had Acosta helping cut that deal. All right. Acosta was quoted in
former Labor Secretary.
Well,
former Labor Secretary Alex Acosta.
So for those that don't know, let me give you a timeline. Vicky Ward puts out a story that Acosta was told to give him a sweetheart deal because he was, quote unquote, connected to intelligence. Again, the story's so big that during a press conference on a separate issue, Acosta gets asked about it. Acosta can't deny it. So he says, look, I'm aware of the reports. All I would say is you don't believe everything that you read. Within 24 hours, he was side by side with Trump on television, leaving that job. Okay, so we're talking about multiple decades. Now, I would say this. Trump was pretty outward about exposing Epstein, which leads me to believe that he did not have sexual relationships with underage girls. Donald Trump, if you don't think he had sex with Stormy Daniels for money, if you've never watched him on Stern, if you don't realize he is a serial philanderer, you're in imagination land. The guy literally ran beauty pageants, okay? I think that and maybe some estate deals, because those estate deals that went sour were also reported on, was his connection. You can go to a Vanity Fair article where he wasn't getting on Epstein's plane. Epstein was getting on his plane. Okay. And it's quoted. I mean, all that stuff is real and I've reported forever. So look, I don't think Trump is as dirty as some of the other ones. The other thing is, you know, you talk about currying favor and the money. You have Clintons with the Clinton Initiative and the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was counsel on foreign relations, trilateral commission. These are some heavyweight positions. And I'll leave it with one other person that we have not discussed at all here, Les Wexner. Les Wexner and him, oh boy, they're right together. And Les Wexner, very political on the Israeli side as well. There's that Mossad connection again. And he's got no jail.
I'll go to you, Johnny.
Yeah,
I really want
that's a good time to pass it off to Vedmore, because I could have gone on for. I mean, let me just hit this really quickly. We talk about that suicide. And you mentioned Nicholas Tartiglione. Now, he wasn't that jacked when he was in prison, but I'm from New York. Pretty corrupt cop. What they finally got him on is he cold-bloodedly executed 4 guys on an upstate New York farm in a drug deal and got convicted of that. Now, the first suicide attempt, Epstein's lawyer and Epstein's brother have been on the record that they said Tartiglione tried to strangle him. All right. Someone mentioned Bill Barr being there the day of. Bill Barr is rear CIA. And there was a New York Post report before the first suicide attempt that Bill Barr had visited him in prison, which they then had to retract. I just want to put that out there.
All
so Vedmore, take it from there.
Let me, before I go to you, so Johnny, I want you to finish up, but I have a question for you as well, and then I'll let you respond to that. Look, there's going to be people, I mean, there's thousands and thousands of people watching this stream. So the people watching, now everybody on this panel obviously has done a lot of homework. I think Johnny has clearly shows his work. I'm sorry, Jason clearly shows his work. So everybody's done a ton of research on this, right? Everybody knows what they're talking about from a level like, you know, I'm going to call it the conspiracy Dungeons and Dragons level. Like, you guys know the game, right? But there's a lot of people watching this stream that are like, who's Epstein? Did he kill himself? I mean, that is the extent of people's knowledge of the Epstein thing, is whether or not he killed himself. And he had an island, and whether or not Trump was there on the airplane. That is basically the majority of people's fund of information, if they even know that much. So, Johnny, and I'll let you respond to what Jason was saying, is what is, and I hate to use the expression again because it was already brought up at the 30,000 foot thing, but if I'm just learning, and I see the press conference today, and Caroline Levitt says, yeah, there's no more files there. And you know, you have conservative pundits saying, no, Trump wasn't on the plane, Trump wasn't on the island, whatever, he was on the plane, he knew a lot of rich people. And Bongino says Epstein killed himself. Okay, fine, that's the end. What is a way that you can kind of tell people, wait, there's a little bit more here, without getting so far into the weeds that people are like, well, you lost me at conspiracy theory. You know what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of people who haven't done the research you did, and it's like trying to explain somebody algebra before you taught them math. So
let me give you a tiny little bit of short form, something really easy and simple. Hey, Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence interlocutor. He worked with multiple intelligence agencies from all over the world. He was running guns. He was running operations. He was also helping with political programs for the Democratic Party. He was choosing the leaders of the Democrat Party. He was going and funding people before they got up to leadership positions, and then he would help them get in and stay in. The people who he was helping get in as well were the all linked to the CIA. And I got to now get in the weeds. I must get in the weeds. I was listening there.
So to follow up then, so to restate what you said so people can understand, Jeffrey Epstein wasn't just some rich guy who did bad things to women. He was also an operative, potentially, of several intelligence organizations that had a big role in king-making in the United States.
Let me give an example that will tie in all of this. Ghislaine Maxwell did not recruit Jeffrey Epstein, was not his handler. Jeffrey Epstein, between 1980 and 1984, was running guns with the CIA in Iran-Contra. Part of that was with Stanley Pottinger, sharing an office with Stanley Pottinger. Stanley Pottinger's business partner later was Bradley Edwards, who you've mentioned. Bradley Edwards knew when he met Virginia Giuffre for the first time in 2013-14, and they met for the first time. Stanley Pottinger called him at midnight, and from that moment on, in Bradley Edwards' book, Relentless Pursuit, he says Pottinger was obviously CIA. He was the Winston Wolfe of the CIA. Pottinger helped to cover up Martin Luther King assassination, literally stamped it off as no conspiracy. He helped to cover up other things as well, really big cases, including Watergate, interviewing the head of CIA himself. This is a man who, throughout history, has been given the biggest cases by the CIA to sort out. And he was given the second Epstein case to sort out. Him and Edwards together. This is a conspiracy by the CIA to cover up Jeffrey Epstein's links to the American intelligence infrastructure. And he had links all across the way. He had links all across the board, international. He was working for them all. He was helping bring people like Ehud Barak into the intelligence operations, into tech funding, especially because the science operation and the funding of Edge leads us background to this whole conversation and the fact that even Musk himself, Bezos, Sergey Brin, Kalas Halakamanga, the heads of the social media and technocratic era in 2008 are all going through a Jeffrey Epstein-funded program and how to manipulate people by using their very large social media platforms. Jeffrey Epstein was not doing one thing. He was not just blackmailing for children. He was not just working for Israel. He was not just this or that or the other. Jeffrey Epstein had 1,000 faces, and no one will accept that. And instead, if they concentrate on one or the other, it allows for everything else to fall apart. And
David, I just have to jump in. I just want to make it abundantly clear. There has been no concrete evidence besides a secondhand comment on a report from I don't remember what news organization was said it that said, "Oh, you got to let him go because he has intelligence." That's never been confirmed. No investigation has indicated that he has. There's been resounding denial. And this idea, this is just something that I think when people talk about intelligence, like they like to just, oh, it's CIA and Mossad and MI6 and DGSE. You could say that.
Have you ever read One Nation Under Blackmail Volume 1 and 2? Have you ever read One Nation Under Blackmail Volume 1 and 2? Because there's a lot of evidence in there.
Yes, I have.
Very, very significant evidence. I helped research for that book, and I can tell you masses of evidence, and it points exactly at intelligence. Every single bit. The tens of thousands of sources point at intelligence. Tens of thousands. So you say none, I say tens of thousands.
I just have to remind people that, and if that's the case, well, we haven't seen it now. The cover up is because of the CIA. That's something interesting. There's been no reporting. And two, this idea that although there's always cooperation stuff, when you're talking about human intelligence, sources are the most protected thing, and you do not divulge that. And this idea that somehow he's going to be a CIA asset, but he's also going to be, to be frank, if this is true, if you can say that, you could be, okay, then either every single intelligence agency is absolutely incompetent to the max, to a degree that, and by the way, this guy wasn't an unknown speaker.
Dude, they're evil. They're not.
Yeah, they're not incompetent. He's working for them.
Like evil is incompetence, and that itself is ignoring.
You realize Israel, like when you actually yes, there's deep level intelligence cooperation between
1967, Israel and the West joined intelligence forces.
I really want to go to this point. I think people want to grandiose issues when they're talking about a lot of these sources and how this works, and this idea that one man who was well known, who did not hide, right, was an intelligence asset for the CIA, for the Mossad, for MI6, for
nobody's hid anything in plain sight in global history. By the way, I have a horse that I would like to give you as a lovely gift, sir.
Why not? Let's expand the list. Why don't we add the Chinese MSS? Why don't we add the Russian FSB and SVR? Why don't we add the South African intelligence?
What about the GRU?
The reason I'm not hold on. The reason I'm not connecting those.
He flew to Russia. Do you know he flew to Russia? Do you know?
Yeah, Russia. The reason I'm not connecting to 7, 8, 9, 10 other intelligence agencies is because I don't have evidence for that. The ones that I'm citing, I do have evidence for. So I'm not just making this stuff up. And let me just point out real quick, because this is really important. After Epstein had already been convicted in the mid 2000s, and he got a sweetheart deal in which he actually got to leave jail 12 hours a day to go to work. After that, from 2013 to 2017, Ehud Barak, the former prime minister of Israel, visits him 35 times, documented. 36 times. He's a 35-year member of the IDF. He's a former prime minister, and he's a member of the elite Sayarat Matkal unit, a special forces group known for intelligence gathering and covert operations.
Where did Ehud Olmert end up after his prime ministership? Where did he end up?
You're talking about Olmert. I'm talking about Barak. Why are you talking about Olmert?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said Olmert. So you're saying
Let
let me just counter this for a second. Again, you're going back to this point. Like,
no, I want you to answer my question.
No,
why would the prime minister meet with him 36 times?
Why would Bill Clinton meet with him?
And by the way, he denied it
because he was intelligence.
Because he was photographed going into Epstein's home in New York. So he was a proven liar who claimed he didn't have connections with him and wasn't meeting with Epstein in his home. And then a picture surfaced, and I think it came out in the Daily Mail. So
Let me get to wearing the Russian hat.
Can I just address the idea you can't be a multiple intelligence agent? Okay, let me just say this. There is a guy that it's not debated anymore that was in multiple intelligence agencies, also happened to be Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Now, at the time he was originally outed as Mossad, it was by Seymour Hersh, okay? They sued Seymour Hersh. Seymour won in court. They had to print retractions. After his death, okay, it came out, hey, wait a minute, it wasn't just the Mossad, it was MI6. Now, let's go one step further. Just in the last 18 months, and look, I'm not an expert on anything, but the BBC just ran a special how he was also working with Russian intelligence. We have 2 confirmed, and now we have allegations of a 3rd from Ghislaine Maxwell's father. Let me give you another network. We were talking Iran-Contra, okay? When they went into that New York home, what did they find? They found a false identity and passport for Epstein for him to be in the Middle East in Saudi Arabia. A lot of people don't understand how Iran-Contra worked, but guess what? It was the Israelis that bought those weapons from Czechoslovakia and other Eastern European nations for the plausible deniability factor through Mark Rich and others. They shipped them down to the Sandinistas, and then for the payback, we would ship up the drugs and then pay them back in a loop. So it's been very, very interconnected, not just in that regard, but you could also get into networks like British intelligence post-World War II with the Pakistani ISI and the CIA. That's how it works. They do work for multiple intelligence agencies at some level and multiple interests. So again, if people want documentation on that, it is abundant. And I would encourage people, again, to check out the documentation in the books that Johnny just talked about, because they're this thick and they're all sourced, and it paints again that picture that this person not only had his hands in the geopolitical arena, not only in the arms industry, but also the transhuman one. And again, we'll show our work. So we'll bring it back a little bit so you can read it. Epstein reportedly hoped to develop super race of humans with his DNA. And he is not shy about this. Look, I'm waiting for Bannon. I don't know if he's ever going to release it. I don't know, Steve. But he's got those interviews. Let's hear Epstein in his whole own words. And I bet you we'll get some insights that we never thought we did. The source material is out there, folks. The idea it's not and the documents aren't there is absurd. It is people like Glenn Dubin are not only named in the documents, but they're named in regards to a teenage girl waking up on an island she wasn't on with her identification taken away. You're messing with billionaires and people that have literally been in nepotistic generational power for sometimes hundreds, if not thousands of years when you're talking about the Duke of Essex. We often forget in 2025, we still have royalty and those people actually have power. Okay, so we got to stop being children. That's the whole thing. I don't believe in Santa Claus. I don't like being lied to. And I think that the people that just are on the peripheral, they're so upset because they've just got a snifter of the lies. It's as rotten as hell.
All I'm going to say is this.
Go ahead.
Point. It's like, oh, here's a guy who did all this because he was an Israeli prime minister. And he did all. Inherently, that means in every capacity that he works is he's an intelligence operative, and that is causation, not correlation. Just because somebody, George H.W. Bush used to be the head of this, he was a CIA director.
Right.
Does that mean every single thing he did and every person? Because then by that logic, I can go on the list of everybody that George H.W. Bush mentioned. That's an intelligence asset.
But you're strong man. Hold on.
Wait. Let me just, that's all I want to say because I don't want to hug the mic. We've already been going an hour.
No, I know, but you're kind of strawmanning my position. What I'm saying is, do you not find it odd that this guy with that history, the intelligence history, 35 years in IDF, prime minister, he goes, But he goes and he
He's
spends.
a rich man who's a pervert. That's the,
Okay. So he's a pedophile that was in Israeli intelligence.
If that's what we're saying.
Listen, guys, Ehud Barak went on
Okay.
to work for a Unit 8200 company called Carbine
That
911.
makes more sense to me.
Wait, listen, will you listen? Just shush for a second and listen.
Johnny, you've been going on a long time. We need to let other people speak.
Listen,
we need to let other people speak. Johnny,
I'm being very quick.
Johnny, no. We need to let other people speak.
Okay, you're going to censor me. Okay, that's fine.
No, we're not going to censor.
Okay, you want to listen? I'll say
We-
in 10 seconds. Ehud Barak was working for a Unit 8200 company
10 seconds.
invested by Jeffrey Epstein, Peter Thiel, Nicole Youngkerman, and more. And that was afterwards, 2017 onwards. It was a terribly, terribly linked Mossad company. Yes, he's
Perfect.
Mossad.
Now we got to go to the rest of the speakers. Grant, go ahead.
Okay, I mean, fascinating stuff. Lots of details, but let's go to the big picture here. Okay, today's news means two things. There's only two alternatives. Okay, one, there's some sort of ridiculously bad conspiracy and Donald Trump is involved in it, or two, there is not, and Donald Trump is an incredibly duplicitous to the point of lying to his most hardcore supporters on something of their most highest interest. He doesn't care. Okay, he's either a liar or he's in on it. And I'm going to tell you right now, my vote is for the first one, but you can't rule out the second one. That he's not, he could be in on it, but definitely I think this is a case of a very, very big lie, a very big manipulation. And I think if people are like their heads spinning, where do I land with this? It's definitely we've been lied to. That's just 100%. You can't deny it. We got the binders, we got the quotes, and they tried it today. They tried it in the White House, in the press briefing room today. Fox News said, "Hey, she said she was reviewing this. Where'd it go?" "Oh, no, she didn't review that." Well, either tremendously big lies or tremendously involved. I'll let you guys debate the finer points. Thanks for
They want
having
you
me.
to believe that Epstein took thousands of hours of himself with victims, and there's nobody else on those tapes. Nobody
By
else.
the way, Jason, great point about Alan Dershowitz. I think he's the key man that everybody should be looking at next.
But let me,
he was
let me-
involved
let me
in
go
everything,
there.
Trump and
I
Epstein.
think, but to your point, okay, so this is why I think it's a lie, because I think Clint, I know your question, right? But this is why I think it's a lie, right? Because there's idea of whatever. Look, like if one thing, Clint, you've been in these episodes before with the Trump-Elon feud, the richest man who spent $300 million, and Trump, in a moment of whiff of unloyalty, he pushed him out the side and he didn't care, right? And I think what I'm thinking, and Mike, I want to ask this question, right? Because I think there is a political dimension to this, that to Grant's point that it's a lie, that it was a way for Trump to rile people up, specifically related to the 2024 election. And this was a way for him to say, believe me, I'm going to release everything, even though all this happened during the first administration. They leveraged this because of COVID. They leveraged this because there was this increase in that. I'm not saying the idea of conspiracy because it's crazy. I'm just saying within the construct of there's various things that's going on. He was able to manipulate that in a political sense. Jeffrey Epstein was one of them. It fit very well his narrative of this global elite, this cabal of pedophiles. In many aspects, it fueled the QAnon movement and Pizzagate. He could grab that, use the Jeffrey Epstein in a way to say there's much more, but Biden is hiding it from you. Reelect me and I'll bring it out. And when Pam Bondi comes into office to the Attorney General, she's like, she had to play along for a little bit, but then there's got to a point where if you have Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, and Don Bongino, three of the people that were like the most anti-establishment possible, they're all saying, sorry, people, there's nothing here. But Mike, I mean, there was a political reasoning why they wanted to hype it up, and now it's backfiring on them that I think, as Clint alluded to. But Mike, there is a political reason why they wanted to hype this, and now that they're office, they're kind of caught with the lie.
Absolutely a political reason why they wanted to hype this. And it's very unfortunate because all of the panelists here are very passionate and they're very well read into this. And Trump knows this. If he's not one thing, he's very good at building a coalition and preying on people's vulnerabilities and their fears. You have the perfect person in Jeffrey Epstein. He had a lot of stuff going on. Let's say that each one of our panelists were absolutely correct, that he worked for multiple intelligence agencies. He had his hand in a lot of different cookie jars. All right. That is a totally separate, different issue than him being this horrible, terrible pedophile. But because a certain wing of a certain party has amped up pedophilia and lizard people and all this for a very long time, Trump is very good at cliffhangers. You have to remember, this guy is a television producer, right? So let's just keep fishing. Let's just keep throwing things out. Let's just keep riling up our base as saying there's something there. He knew very well that there was nothing there, but he knew he had the perfect patsy. You can say that Jeffrey Epstein was a lot of different things, because he probably was. But the reason why the FBI doesn't have all the history of everything that he was, because if what you guys are saying is true, that he worked for all of these multiple intelligence agencies all over the world, they don't always share information. So maybe the FBI really has turned over everything that they have. Doesn't mean that he doesn't do all these other things, but those other things that he has going on aren't related to his sex trafficking case either.
Let me jump in here for a second, really briefly. I'm not going to go too into the rabbit hole, but I got to just say this. Sure. There's one other case that I reported on that had these big violations of the Crime Victims' Rights Act. And it was a man who used to sell the Donald Trump name. His name was Felix Seder. He worked for the FBI as an informant, but always claimed that he was a CIA informant. And if there's ever another case that I've seen that shares the same, the same mystery and the same procedural thing happening at the same time, it was Felix Seder. And it's, he keeps claiming he worked for the CIA. Nobody but FBI agents has ever said he did anything. So, I mean, this is not something that's never happened before. I think that's just important to point out. That's
I just want to address something, because I haven't heard the lizard people thing brought up in such a serious topic for years. It's usually the flat Earth thing that I get.
The lizard people are serious people, Jason. Let's they've been seen on airplanes. Okay.
I just want people to know that what I
do.
The
ones taking their shoes off on the airplanes, because I agree.
He was just talking about that side of the aisle. Dennis Hassert, who at the time was the longest serving Speaker of the House, was labeled by a judge as a serial child molester. This is somebody that was molesting kids all the way back when he was a gym teacher, and not only got to the heights of the Senate, but became the Speaker of the House. That should let everybody know that a lot of these people are compromised. By the way, he got sentenced to, I think it was 18 months, and I think he did 13 because he was an old man in a wheelchair. That's how we do things in this country. Okay, so I do want to agree with the host.
Well, they convicted him of structuring a Patriot Act violation for hiding his hush money payments. Right?
I think there's a big difference, guys, than someone leaning into something politically and using it. Then there's nothing there and they know it. Okay, because he obviously knew just from being in the circles with Epstein, certain things were going on. We mentioned the Mar-a-Lago incident. That is Virginia Giuffre Roberts. People have to understand, for Virginia Giuffre Roberts to get out of that situation, she had worked herself up into the apex of that women's network that I mentioned, the Groffs, the Marcinkovas, the Kalins, and decided to jump ship when she was in another country. Okay, like that takes a lot. And I would also say this. When you look at her documentation, there's a reason that Dershowitz was able to win in court against her when he sued her, because she did some shady things, and just to point out that I am not the ultra conspiracy guy, I've actually looked at the evidence of Virginia Giuffre Roberts and the quote unquote suicide, and I lean towards suicide. I don't know that anything nefarious actually happened there, other than it seemed like she faked being in a hospital in a minor car accident just before she had lost custody of her kids. She had been serial abused by this man and others. And I believe all the money in the world doesn't really heal that wound if you can't be with your family. And that probably is the explanation there. And, I've seen people go off on jags and rails. I stick to the facts. While I was doing this show, the man that actually got the initial black book, and I could tell you that story, published in Gawker, contacted me. We're going to be doing a whole show with Nick Bryant on this subject. And I'll pass the torch because there are so many of us. But I promise you all, there are a lot of theirs, but we haven't had any high-level accountability in this country since Iran-Contra. And those were slaps on the wrist. And Oliver North, who they made the head of it, what did he get? He got book deals and TV shows.
And
That's
a pardon.
how you curtail illegal arms dealing. You make somebody into a celebrity millionaire.
Well,
And then he became the president of the NRA.
let me. Well, I mean, if you're an arms dealer, you want to be the president.
And
right?
by the way, if you look at who's the president today, I've been reporting on him for the last couple of weeks.
No more
Whose name is
conspiracy.
Bill
We're not
Bockenberg.
going
Not a
to any more
conspiracy.
conspiracy directions.
These are court reports. All court settlements, court cases. Just released it actually. 2020 election deniers lose 2 significant settlements. You guys can check it out at newsletter.grantstern.com. Not settlements, 2 significant appeals.
So here's the deal, and I'm glad you brought up election denying. I'm not talking about the election, just so you know. But if we were to do a space about the election, if we were to do a space about COVID or the vaccines, if we were to do a space about JFK or a show about JFK, if we were to do a show about Epstein, I can find it'd probably be you guys, but I'm sure I can find people like you guys that can give me names and evidence and pictures and books and documentation and all of this stuff to show that all of these things either did or didn't happen. Again, I'm going back to the fact that there are people watching that don't study this as much as you do. So what I've heard everybody talk about, and you've provided proof to support your theory, if Epstein was this single, double, triple agent, FBI / Mossad / MS, whatever that. I'm the British intelligence. I'm saying MS-13.
Wrong M.
Yeah,
MI6.
MI6. Thank you. I'm like, he's not a Brago Garcia. Now that guy's in a couple of intelligence agencies, maybe 2 now, right? So, but the idea is, if he's Jason Bourne, right? Epstein's Jason Bourne. Why is Epstein Jason Bourne? And then what was his mission besides just doing horrible things to children on his island? And then I
It's to
guess
build compromising files on the rich and powerful.
So that
all
was
over
his
the world.
mission. So what you're saying, Clint, is that he was weaponized by several intelligence apparatus to get dirt, to basically to honeypot people, the richest and most powerful people, to leverage against them for whatever political purpose.
Here, Jason's chomping at the bit, so maybe he feels differently.
David,
Jason jumps at the bit always.
I'll give you a document you can look at for that political influence. So I mentioned Les Wexner, okay?
Right.
Les Wexner has something out there called the Wexner Report. Again, these guys, as tight as it gets, the Manhattan Mansion allegedly sold to, give $10. It was given to him for $10, that piece of property, okay, by this man. Go look up the Wexner Report. Came out shortly after Saddam was toppled in Iraq, and it gives a propaganda list to keep us in the war there, including commercials with pregnant women, etc. So much political influence for the United States to stay there because of his allegiance to Israel. Wexner is, a big Israeli lobbyist in that political sphere. And let me just say this again. I mean, obviously, in the Middle East, we are very allied with Israel. So there is that political influence right there. And by the way, that was a leaked report. It wasn't for the public. It's pretty outrageous.
Right. But now, before I get too far into that, and again, I appreciate the research, and Stefano's like on his way out. He's like, he can't get further out. He's like,
let's march out of the weeds here, guys. Let's march out of the weeds. Out of the weeds. Bigger picture.
So what I'm saying is, all right. And so, Clint, what you're saying is, the reason why Epstein was empowered by whatever intelligence organization empowered him, the goal was to have him take powerful people to his island, get him to do stupid things, and then use that as leverage
not just the island, but also the New York City and the New Mexico and the other properties that he had. But
to his various locations.
But just can I summarize it? It's kind of like Blackmail Inc. Like everybody's like, he worked for this guy, he worked for that guy, he worked for the other guy. Maybe he just worked for himself, but did a lot of jobs for all these guys. So it's kind of like Blackmail Inc.
So
he had to make money somehow.
Blackmail Inc. Right,
So
got to make some money somehow. He was collecting all this damaging information on all these wealthy people. I mean, I'm sure there's some sort of value to somebody with each piece of it, right?
All right, so let's pause there for a second because I'm trying to pull this out for people watching. Okay, I don't want them to get buried in the weeds. So Epstein, his job, because he was an arms dealer, maybe that's where. And tell me if I'm tracking, because I've been here for the whole hour listening. So he starts as an arms dealer, gets to meet all these wealthy people and powerful people. Somehow he gets tied up in intelligence. Then he starts this Honeypot Inc. company, essentially, with the goal of getting dirt on all of these folks. And so then
intelligence before an arms dealer.
Okay, so
you don't get in that arena.
Okay, so why was he initially then engaged by what made Epstein so special? What made Jason Bourne Jr. so special that before he became an arms dealer, that he got approached by all of these? Like, he wasn't a Navy SEAL, he wasn't Delta, he was just a dude who did appropriate things with women, and all these global intelligence agents were like, that's our guy. Yeah. Hey, listen. And so they made him an arms dealer. Explain that.
His pathway to wealth started in the 80s, but I think Jason would actually do a better job of doing the origin story.
Okay.
Oh, so no. Let's come on. This is the end, isn't it? Not the beginning.
Can we get when I ask these questions? When I ask these questions, I want very short answers, because what I'm trying to do for anybody who's watched for the hour and 18 minutes that hasn't turned it off and like, this is over my head, I'm trying to bring it all home for people who've watched and was like, okay, what is my takeaway from this? So I have this really smart panel of people who've done a lot of research. So I'm trying to extract from you guys the takeaway.
Let's give Jason 30 seconds. He'll give you the origin.
So answer that question first. Where did mini Jason Bourne come from?
So if you watch the Jason Bourne series, where did he even come from? Okay, it's kind of just like this random guy. If you believe the Epstein story, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but they talk about the Dalton School and the possibility of Bill Barr's father bringing him in. Now, just think about.
So he was recruited because he had some kind of special talent.
Maybe he could talk well. Maybe he had connections. Again, we've only heard his voice.
Maybe he's just a polymath or a really smart person.
Again,
he had some kind of superpower that made the X-Men interesting.
He was very good at tax accounting. That's for sure true.
All right.
But if you look at somebody like Bill Barr, he's literally in the Central Intelligence Agency before he's a lawyer and passes the bar exam. So they like to get you young. Why was he so special? Well, you could argue nepotism. Okay.
Got it.
I think that they get people at a certain level, usually when they're trying to find themselves that have talents.
That's how they recruit for Skull and Bones.
Yeah. Well,
postgraduate.
In fact, you want to watch another Matt Damon
movie?
We're
not going there.
There's another Matt Damon movie all about that, by the way.
I want to make
the idea that this guy surrounds himself with other billionaires of note, and then by the time he's arrested, those black book, Theo was connected.
But again, and I don't mean to cut you off. So the origin was he possibly had a skill set. He was identified. He was brought in.
Bill Barr's dad teaching in an exclusive high school in New York City.
Got it.
Dalton.
So Bill Barr,
Oxford, those type of places are rife with recruitment for intelligence.
So he's recruited by Bill Barr, and I'm not. So the idea is he's recruited by Bill Barr. Then he gets his father, Bill Barr's father, Barr Sr. And he gets recruited into arms dealing, where he makes these powerful connections around the world, right? That somehow turns into Honeypot Inc. Am I tracking?
Can I
over many decades?
Let's just say he gets recruited into a lot of things in the 1980s.
It's intelligence, and then he leaves that he gets recruited by intelligence, and then he gets into the financial industry, which is all mixed up with a gun running. And
you have to have that financial institution to run billions of dollars.
We know it from his history. That's where he was. He was in the financial industry, and through that, he then entered into New York in the 80s when it was wild. Everybody was working for someone, and these ballrooms of power were really small, but filled with people who went on to change our world. And so these guys, he's one of those people who changed our world.
Got it. Okay, so I'm going to interrupt again just to make sure I'm extracting for the brass tacks of it. So Epstein becomes this very influential broker of sorts through various intelligence organizations in smoky rooms. When you talk about the people in the smoky rooms, Epstein was the guy in the smoking room. Okay. Then from there, all of this stuff goes on for all of these years, and then it's exposed and everybody starts freaking out. So my question here becomes, you've already mentioned all the Oxford and all the institutions that become recruiting hotbeds for various intelligence agencies. I can't imagine Jeffrey Epstein, and I'm not discounting anything you guys say. I'm asking questions for people watching or trying to understand. So I can't imagine Jeffrey Epstein is like some kind of like super spy. He's probably has skills that other spies would have if he's a spy. And as a result, why is he so important compared to everybody else that could possibly have been involved with intelligence? I mean, go back to the JFK files and everything we learned. There was all these intelligence organizations. There was people working in Russia, working in Cuba, in Mexico, all these places where really our intelligence screwed up. And if our intelligence community is that sloppy, I guess, with Jeffrey Epstein being probably the weakest link, how come there's not more Epsteins?
David,
Well, to believe that there's not is a mistake. And also,
okay, so there is more Epsteins.
Yeah, and also there's hundreds of victims that came out because he did it for so many decades. The better question is to flip it on you. How did he get away with doing this for so many decades if he wasn't connected to intelligence? Isn't that fascinating? Why did he get a sweetheart deal in the mid 2000s? Why did he go on?
But here's my counter. How did Bernie Madoff get away so year until everything came collapsing? Because they're rich.
Because it's a Ponzi scheme and people don't go broke until the very end. That's a totally different scenario.
Right. I mean but that was the whole. But what my argument, because you guys were laying out everything. I'm sorry. I'm like trying to follow along, and it's like it just. So he like, and I'm just like, and what it is, it's like yes, like everybody agrees. It's like that doesn't like to me personally. And again, I'm not talking like I've done intelligence. Like I was in the military, did MI, worked in a skiff, like did all that shit. And you guys are laying everything out. And I'm like, you guys all agree, like this makes perfect sense. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, this doesn't make any sense. Rather than what I think is the most. Now, did he?
But why? Why does it not make sense to you?
Maybe he was the honeypot aspect of it makes 100%. Did he work for intelligence or he did it for his own?
You got to look at the
gain?
evidence.
That's fine. But then the question becomes, going back, because we're going in it goes back to this bigger scheme, which is, and I'm going to go to Liz quickly for this, if I may, just to give her an opportunity, because I know we go. If there is a list that has been said, and everybody here is saying it, maybe he was intelligence. For argument's sake, I'll agree with you. Okay, it's an intelligence. It's not. He did it for intelligence. They had all this armed trafficking, whatever you want to say. Great. So why then, if Trump was in office the first term, he would have known. He's the president of the United States. He would have known, and the first time when he was in prison, indicted, he would have known this is a CIA asset, he's a Mossad asset, he's an MI, whatever. We've used him. So why in the hell, if what all you're saying, why between 2020 to 2024, even like Trump would run on this Epstein, if he was an asset and they knew?
I can answer that question.
Doesn't make any sense to me. He would have shut up from the beginning. But no, let me go. I do want to give Liz an opportunity, and then I'll go to Stephen as well. Go ahead, Liz, and because I do want to give others. I'm not trying to cut you off, Johnny. I just want to give opportunity to others to speak.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to, earlier you guys were talking about why Epstein, like why would they choose him to run this blackmail operation? And, from my standpoint, I would say that the man was so cunning. He was so manipulative, and he also was crazy charming and crazy charismatic. And I will say, like Johnny and I have been talking about Bradley Edwards' book, and after I read that book, I got to tell you, one of the most shocking things I walked away from after reading that book that took me a few days to process was the fact that Bradley Edwards became obsessed with Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was basically running psychological operations on Bradley Edwards on top of seducing him. And when I say seducing, I don't mean sexually, but he was seducing him, manipulating him, running psychological operations on him, disarming him. These are tactics that intelligence agents, actually very skilled ones, highly trained ones, use. I'm sure some of it comes to him naturally, and that's why he was chosen. But these are tactics that highly trained, skilled, and crazy smart intelligence operators use. If he was able to manipulate, seduce, and run these operations in a somewhat successful way against this man who's a very strong man, he's a tough lawyer, he's like is a total badass, himself. If he was able to seduce this guy and disarm him, then, who wouldn't he be able to disarm? In terms of this being a blackmail operation, like Jeffrey Epstein wasn't even that much on the DL on the fact that he was running a blackmail operation. When he got really big and powerful people blackmailed, he would brag about it. And there was reports specifically talking about how when he managed to get blackmail on Prince Andrew, he joked about it and he told all his friends that like this was like the Super Bowl of blackmail. Getting Prince Andrew, dirt on him, it was like, you know, winning the Super Bowl, getting a Super Bowl trophy, whatever. So that's not really like a secret. 24-hour surveillance, like footage, cameras in every single home, the island, the New Mexico home, the New York home. They even had cameras in the toilet. Okay, so I mean, this definitely was a blackmail operation. I don't think that's a secret. Again, like in terms of the fact that Epstein was arrested during President Trump's first term, which, by the way, that would have happened if it wasn't for his DOJ. Now, the fact that nothing happened during Biden's administration, and we'd like to see more happening and like the truth and like not these like, psyops or games or lies coming up from Trump's administration. I agree. And I get that. But at the end of the day, this is a massive international ring that involves thousands of potential co-conspirators and or clients, whatever you want to call them. This is like taking down the mafia on steroids. It's not going to happen in 6 months. I don't believe President Trump's part of the cover-up. I think there's going to be a lot.
No, but again, Liz, okay. Again, you're not understanding my question. President Trump would have known in 2019 he was, let's say for a second and make the assumption he was a CIA asset. Trump would have known in 2019 as president of the United States. He would have been briefed that. His CIA director would have told him that was politically appointed by Trump. He would have known. Second of all, okay, what's the cover? Like, okay, let's say what you're saying is true. There's a bunch of rich people who had sex with underage girls. That's what's the like if you tell me it sounds terrible. Yeah, go after them. What person around the world wouldn't be like, bravo, get him, get them? Like Diddy. When Diddy was caught, now he got acquitted by a jury of his peers on the prostitution and racketeering, all that. Like, okay, like and that, like, okay, fine. But you tell me there's a bunch of rich people that probably 99% of Americans have no idea. We know people on the list. Prince Andrew, as Clint said, a former Israeli prime minister. Like, what's the concern? And that's the second point. So one, Trump would have known in 2019 he was a CIA asset. And two, what's the concern about a bunch of rich people? Because if this was a blackmail operation to get dirt on these people, now you have them, prosecute them.
No. Sit rep. This is the mistake. So give me 10 seconds. I'll answer. If you have blackmail on these people, you're talking about the richest and most powerful people in the world. You don't prosecute them. You use that blackmail so that you can get them to do your bidding. So the reason
it's no longer blackmail once you prosecute them.
Exactly. So that's not the reason you're building these files. That's not the reason that you're getting compromise on these people.
I mean, it's not to
put them in jail. That's what we would like to believe that the DOJ and the FBI are there to do, and the CIA for that matter. But they're not. That's not their job.
Can I just ask you a question quick? You're muted, by the way, but you're muted still.
You're muted.
Can I ask you a question quick?
Muted.
Okay, go ahead.
So I mentioned the Acosta thing, right? How he's literally outed in the media as cutting the deal because Epstein was part of intelligence. You can go watch the clip of him not answering the question and not denying it.
Hey guys.
And then you're talking about Trump. Trump relieved him because he knew there were intelligence connections. Okay. He always used it for political power. There was never, ever any sense that anyone's going to get prosecuted. That's imagination land. All right. These people are too powerful. Now, if you disagree with me, explain to me why within a literal 48-hour period of a news report that Epstein was intelligence, the guy in the Trump administration that cut the deal doesn't answer the question and then is forced to resign. Does that make sense to you if he's not intelligence?
Well, he was forced to resign because there was public uproar. Because I remember it came up because he got slapped with the wrist. There was one report. Why wouldn't the Acosta just say that's not true? Hold on. Out of all the reporting, I believe I don't remember which one. There was one that mentioned a possible intelligence. Others saying like he was rich and powerful, and that he managed to get away because he was rich and powerful, as many would say, is like there's two. Hold on, Johnny. Let me go to Johnny to answer this because that's where I'm trying to understand this. I don't understand the argument. if he's, let's say you're 100%, let's say everything you're saying, they want it for compromise. So why then? So then we're in agreement that Trump played everybody.
Brother, that's where we are in agreement.
Yes.
If you don't
So
think
we all agree.
Can I say something that people don't really know?
Go ahead, Johnny.
No one really knows this, so this is something that's really interesting, and you should all know this. Listen, Trump in 2017 put Matthew Pottinger, who's Stanley Pottinger, Bradley Edwards' law partner, who was the one who was the CIA. He put his son, Matthew Pottinger, in charge as executive deputy national security advisor. And I believe that is the moment where the operation to take down Jeffrey Epstein started. And from that point on, the next 2 years, it was really the plan of, listen, there's way too much skeletons in that closet. There's arms dealing, there's influence, there's him traveling around with the former president, meeting leaders all around the world and planning or other forms of programs and operations in other countries. So obviously there's a load of skeletons in the closet. Let's just end it. 2017, the operation began. Matthew Pottinger moved in next door to his father. He also, some people who were involved in the case also set up a fake company called the Federal Enforcement Bureau or something like that it was called, and then they went to take down Jeffrey Epstein properly. And whether they were involved in the murder of Jeffrey Epstein, I don't know, or the supposed suicide of Jeffrey, I don't know. But I can tell you, from 2017, that was Trump.
This is very important. I don't understand, because if our thesis is right, and most on this panel are in, there's a consensus that he was intelligence and he was building this for political leverage and things of that nature and blackmail. Why would they allow him, like, if you're gonna take him off the chessboard, so to speak, why allow him to be arrested? Why have this messy suicide in jail? Why not just whack the guy? It doesn't make any sense to me that they don't kill him before they prosecute him.
I agree. I think their hands were forced. So the case against him had barrel rolled into a point where they had to do something, and if he had just died then the rest of the stuff really would have the calls would have been even louder than they are now, because it would have looked like there was no attempt to hold him to justice.
I know, but having him kill himself in prison though didn't exactly calm things down.
With a bad situation, that's the best they could do, and the CIA does the best they could do with a bad situation, and it goes wrong over and over again. And this is what I think happened. But that's my own opinion on that.
Sure.
If I could jump in just on one more really intelligence cue that we just have not hit on, is the third person in the ring that was being prosecuted for these light crimes, that was in with Ghislaine and Epstein. And you can see him on one of their planes with an IDF hat and rocking the IDF hat over at some of the properties as well. Jean-Luc Brunel. And again, this is somebody who's involved in the fashion industry, because if you want to curry favor with people, pretty young girls and pretty young women is a good way to do it. For those that don't know, Brunel was being charged in Spain and allegedly committed suicide there as well. And I'm not saying he didn't commit suicide there. I can only imagine, the prison system and what might have been going on there. I do think you can get people to kill themselves in prison. However, when I look at the Epstein evidence in particular, the coroner's report, the fact that you did not have a suicide in that institution for 13 years, and it was the same institution they kept El Chapo, who, again, had actually escaped from prison in other countries. That facility should have been airtight, and the videos that they've presented today, they're kind of a joke to me. I'm not going to lie. But again,
is there anything to that minute gap in the video, do you guys think?
I'm not even going to weigh in, even though I'm a video editor and I do those sorts of things. I will say this: the video manipulation has been extremely easy for a very, very long time. If you look at the court cases where they were going to or tried to prosecute the guards that quote unquote fell asleep, and how that case kind of fell apart at the end, you have to wonder again, what was going on with those two, who had access to the original tapes, or if you could mess with the live feed and the tape would look like that. All of that is a very, very real thing. I mean, espionage does exist, everybody.
So let me throw it over to Stephen for the last question, because we got to wrap. I'm trying to play the role of somebody who's just watching this for the first time and figuring all this out. What we've heard today was that Epstein may have been, and I'm saying may because I know you guys have made a later case. I'm just saying to be objective. may have been involved with intelligence, may have been building a honeypot operation to blackmail people, and then may have killed himself or not. And the evidence presented may or may not have been altered. This is all what's out there, right? Whether it was other countries, whether it's just the United States, whether, whatever. But here's my question. Donald Trump's president now, right? He ran on transparency. He says he was going to release the JFK files. That was one of the promises he made to Robert Kennedy Jr. He releases the JFK files. He releases the RFK files. Of course, they're redacted, whether or not you believe they're real or not. Again, I always go back to the fact that I don't think intelligence is going to keep detailed records for 70 years just to release them and expose themselves. So I don't know how valuable those files release. Anyway, but he does release them, right? Same thing with the Epstein files. He says, we're going to release the Epstein files, right? And he says, we're just going to be transparent. We're going to give all this stuff out. I think there becomes a point where what people know and don't know that they have or don't have could play a factor into the Pam Bondi thing, the binder thing. Maybe they thought there was more there than it was there. Maybe they were just trying to keep promises and hoping nobody knows. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, and I don't think we're ever really going to know. But here's the question at the end of the day. Donald Trump is probably, arguably, look, we've had Joe Biden, we've had Donald Trump before, we've had Barack Obama, we've had Democrats, Republicans, and we've had Republican outsiders, right? We've had every type of president that you can hope to have other than maybe like a third party, and we're not going to talk about that today. You have everybody go into the White House. What we don't have evidence from the White House on is aliens or Epstein. So knowing that we're not going to get another president to come in and give us more information than Trump's willing to give us, and knowing Dan Bongino said there's no evidence that he didn't kill himself, he killed himself. There's no client lists. This is the end of it. Nobody else is getting prosecuted other than people being prosecuted. This is it. If that's where this is, then isn't this the end of it? I mean, the only thing left from here forward is to just hypothesize what people think could happen, point the fingers, make the case. But in the end, who's going to do anything about it? Because nobody else is coming along to do anything different. And if they do, there's not going to be any new information. So, Stephen, last word to you.
Sure.
Does it matter anymore? Do we just move on?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I think it's important for people to understand a few things. And one is there's deeper levels to government than we see. And what I mean by that is the deep state does exist. There's an intelligence community. There's people in positions of political power that were installed there, that rose through the ranks. They're bureaucrats. They're highly powerful officials, people that we don't know, that we don't elect, that get into positions of power and stay there for a very long time. And those are the people in many ways pulling the levers on the machine. When Edward Snowden came out and blew the lid off of the whole NSA domestic spying program, we got to learn a little bit about what's behind the curtain. So what else don't we know? The Pentagon is probably the largest purveyor of waste, fraud, and abuse. I've encouraged Elon to go after the Pentagon through Doge. They fail every single audit they've been given. There's literally trillions of dollars that we don't know where it's gone. Where is this money going? Is it going to skunk works? Is it going to back rebels in the Middle East? Is it reverse engineering UFOs? We don't know. And so there's people in these positions that do terrible things. We've seen the government, of course, carry out terrible things and cover it up or lie to the public about it. We saw the Tuskegee experiments where they were injecting the black community with syphilis. We saw Operation Mockingbird, where the CIA admitted to infiltrating the media to control narratives and gatekeep pro-government positions. During COVID, we saw the government essentially whitewash the origins of the virus. We saw them only push one form of prophylactic, which was the vaccines. We saw, the World Health Organization try to clamp down on misinformation and work with social media to do it. And there was all this, people in the NIH and in other organizations that were pulling the strings. And to be quite honest with you, I think to Donald Trump's credit, wherever it is, I think there's elements of this government even he is afraid to contest with. I think the machine goes so deep into such dark places that there's real power and real control in places that we don't know. who's really pulling the strings in some areas at the risk of getting conspiratorial. But that's the issue with having such a large government apparatus that's so deeply entrenched. So from a libertarian perspective and point of view, we do not trust the government to give us the answers. I think it's going to be up to people like Jason and like Johnny and other folks in this panel to really peel back the layers of this onion and try to find out what's at the center, and hopefully bring some truth to the subject, to the point to where we can finally either see justice through the justice system, or at least in the court of public opinion. I don't know what's going to come first, if we ever really know the truth within our lifetime or decades later. I will point out one thing. You look at an incident like the USS Liberty, where the IDF attacked one of our own spy ships that was operating in the Gulf, happened totally unprovoked. The U.S. Congress made a commission to investigate the USS Liberty and what happened. It turned out to be a big cover-up. Decades later, the chair and some of the other members of that commission went out and said, look, we were pressured to do the wrong thing. The reality was it happened in a way that was, looks very bad on the IDF. And these are things we find out decades later. So what else are we going to find out decades later from now, when this supposedly doesn't matter anymore? I think it does matter. I think it's going to add to the distrust that people have in their government. I think trust in government's at an all-time low. And, it's only going to add to that fire. And I'll just follow up with saying, I think you're going to see a big schism in the MAGA camp, where a lot of people are looking at Donald Trump. They're promised the Epstein files or promised all these things. Maybe they never existed. Maybe they exist and they're in a file somewhere and in a bunker that we'll never know about for years. Maybe we already know some things, but the courts will never take it up. But adding to that distrust is fuel for even more fire that I think we're only beginning to see the surface. And, there's a lot of things we need to get to the bottom of, but I really don't trust our government to help us find those answers. And I think more and more of that trust is being dissolved by the day.
Yeah, well, and we still don't know what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania. So to your point, there's a lot of very interesting things that a lot of people don't have the answers to. I think the one thing we can agree on is that we can't acknowledge that there is a world that exists outside of the things we're allowed to know about for one reason or another, whether it's for better or for worse. And at some point, I guess we just have to hope that they're working in our best interest and not against it. But with that, you've made an excellent point that to learn more, if people want to dive deeper, if they have the motivation and the bandwidth, everybody on this panel right now, like you could see their names, take this as the opportunity to, if you're watching, to jot down the names of the people on this panel. Because as you've heard, they talk about this a lot. You can go very deep. You can go on their shows to engage in their chat as well and learn more about these topics. And I appreciate so much the overview that we got today and the information. And clearly you guys have gone very far into uncovering some of this stuff. And so if people want to learn more, this is what the beauty of this free speech platform is you can uncover this information, you can give it to people, and now the people have a place to consume it. And all of you showcased your research and your talents very well here today. And I appreciate you all so very much. Stefano, do you have any closing words before we say goodbye?
No, I just want to thank everybody for their time here. I know I got passion. I know I got great. There was yelling, which is always fun. We got to make it exciting and not monotone. So that's great. I know some of the speakers here, when they joined like, how do we jump in? Do we wait? You know what? We try to do question and answer, and then everybody jumps in. And unlike Spaces, right, David, where we could just mute everybody, here we're at the whims of who screams louder to get control. But no, I appreciate everybody. This is something, and I told David in the background we were having this, like, I need your help on that. I'll be honest, I'm not in the very well in tuned in this. I just think my personal opinion, though, it's not something I've tracked extensively. But I do always want to provide pushback and to prevent this idea, groupthink on a stage, and be more contrarian is something to get to the point, is to get deeper into this. This is something we talked about yesterday on the space when it first broke. We had this live stream, and it's probably something we're going to be talking about a lot, because although we're trying to get at the bottom of this, at least people cannot discount, I think, the political significance of this, in the sense of also possibly even betrayal between a lot of people, because a lot of people put a lot of hope on this, and this seems like they got played and duped, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to scream accountability. So with that, I want to thank everybody here. We will probably have either a space or another live stream, so stay tuned. Follow my great friend David here. Follow all the speakers here. and make sure that you also follow Mario and stay tuned for the next episode. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.